while we were there, the whole premise of me being there was I was speaking both nights. And it was kind of cool because I was in a situation where I was speaking more on religion as opposed to typical just straight conservation. And I was able to bring up some of like my favorite research points that I've ever come up with as far as why I believe in God. And like to kind of go through the premise of it just roughly, because that is also going to be a vlog. So I filmed 3 vlogs in 5 days and worked around the clock. Didn't miss a workout and didn't miss a cold plunge. How at you, boy. But that vlog will be coming out very soon, where you'll get to see the entire speech and everything like that and the interactions with the audience. But I know the audience on the podcast is a little bit different. That's why I want to hit on it. So the first one was I talked about, and like I was basically saying, growing up, I was told to believe in God, and I did this in front of a live audience. I didn't think it through. And I was like, I realized when I was like 18 or 19, I believed in God for the same reason I believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny as a kid, because someone told you to. They're like, yeah, this is real, so believe. So you get to the age where you're like, oh, that's what I'm doing. And that was a lie. And then Jeff goes, did you just tell everybody in this entire room that Santa Claus wasn't real? Thank God all the kids were on tablets, so they didn't hear a thing. And hopefully they would have just thought I was wrong anyways. Yeah. But they're like, someone's getting cool. But when I came to terms with that, I got real scientific on, like, I wanted to know why I believed. So the first thing I went back to was the Big Bang Theory. So you go to the Big Bang Theory and you look at it and you say, okay, what they're asking me to believe is a genuine miracle. They're asking me to believe that something came from nothing. And nowhere, without a God, and nowhere in the history of man have we ever seen any matter appear from nothing. It's never happened. And in addition to that, they're asking us to believe that in that moment, life came from non-life. Meaning we don't have any examples, we don't have any proof, we don't have anything that life comes from non-life ever in this world. So life only ever comes from life. So what was confusing to me is the Big Bang Theory sounds like more of a religion than believing in God, because they're asking you right out of the gate to believe in 2 miracles that we have no proof of, no explanation of, and they want you to believe those 2 miracles, but without there being a God creating them, which I've always struggled with. I've always felt there was a hole in that. And then the second thing I got to was gravity. Now, if you look at gravity, it's precisely perfect, meaning that if gravity was a little bit stronger, the entire world, everything, the entire cosmos would crash into themselves and become a ball, and we would cease to exist. If gravity wasn't as strong, meaning the gravity in general, like the value of gravity in general, was any lighter, then everything would float away, we wouldn't have orbits, and we would cease to exist. So if gravity has to be that precise to be perfect, to have all this lined up, and in order for the cosmos to continue to expand the way they are, gravity needs to have this exact value. If it was a little off either way or the other, it wouldn't work. So at least you can say, like, that doesn't prove God, but you can at least be like, you could lend to think it was a design because it's so precisely perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That doesn't prove God, but it lends to think, how did we just landed on all this by chance? Now the next, go ahead.
No.
Because the next one was about, getting into life and stuff like that, of evolution. So we know evolution. This is the example I used too. We know evolution's real in the sense that if all the frogs had one leg, and they were like living their one-legged frog lives, if one frog had a genetic mutation that gave him 2 legs, he'd be able to hop better, he'd be able to hunt better, he'd be able to procreate better, give her the business or whatever. He'd be able to do all these things better, so he'd be more likely to be successful. He'd be able to avoid predators better, all those sorts of things, hop farther. So he would pass that gene along to his kids, or at least some of them. And some of them would pass that gene along to their kids, and so on and so forth. And you fast forward 500 years, and the ones with 2 legs do so much better than the ones with 1 leg that the 1 legs start to fade away or even go away, where all frogs then have 2 legs. We have proof of this. We've seen this over time. What we don't have proof of is a frog becoming a hawk. And again, what baffles me is the science, the people that don't believe in God, that expect you to believe in science. They have so many miracles they need you to believe in. And this is another miracle. They're asking you to believe that a rabbit can become a deer. They're asking you to believe that a single-celled organism can become a two-cell organism. We don't even have dual-cell organisms. We have single-cell and we have complex. There's a huge gap between the two, and you're not seeing any progression even to this day of that. We have no proof whatsoever that any species has become another species. And as time goes on, they always talk about how time, well, it's because it's over long periods of time. Now they're finding that that's actually counterproductive. The longer you stretch out the time, the more it disproves it. Because what we're seeing is we still have the single-celled organisms, we still have the monkeys, we still have man, we still have the rabbits, we still have the hawks, and as time goes on, as we scour through all this time that has passed, we're not finding any proof that any species has ever jumped ever. So they're asking us to believe in another miracle that has never existed, never happened. And I'm always fascinated by dogs because you look at Millie, your little one. Mm-hmm. It's like she's technically what happens when you mess with genes enough. But at the end of the day, she is a wolf. Yeah. She is a descendant from wolf any way you cut it.
Yeah.
Now, she's a very different thing now. But at the end, you strip apart her DNA, you strip it all away, she's still that animal. She hasn't changed what she is. She hasn't become a different species. She hasn't become a different animal. She is canine.
Yeah.
And no matter those changes. So even as we've manipulated it and changed and tried to create new species in a sense, it doesn't happen. And so it's like, how many miracles does science ask me to believe in that they can't prove? This was not something I talked about, but I've talked about this before too. I got into, you know what, I'm going to skip on that. First thing I'm going to talk about is the DNA. Another thing I talked about was DNA. And it's like, because that's what got me with the whole frog thing. And I'm like, man, okay, you got DNA. DNA is a code, right? What code do you know of that wasn't written? Name a code ever that wasn't made. Like, what code has ever just appeared? DNA is a very complex code. That is its definition. Even gravity is called a law. Why do they call gravity a law? How do laws get put in place? It's like they have to be put there. You can't knock a hole in it because they couldn't define it another way. You had the smartest people in the world trying to name it something. They're like, well, I guess you'd have to call it a law because it's going to happen. That was their best thing. And DNA is a code. And it's a complex code that we couldn't even create now with our best complex computers. No. And that fascinates me. In addition to that, it seems as though I've never gotten more phone calls than
it's crazy.
Right there. And from the most random things.
Yep.
Yeah. But so that was kind of what I talked to. And then there's a passage. Jesus actually said this. He said proof of God's creation, or proof that God created this planet, is so obvious in his creation. Proof of his existence is so obvious in his creation that there's no excuse not to see it. And we talked about this before, where if you were like, and you shouldn't try and play God, but if you're like to look at the entire world or globe, or let's just break it down to the United States, we'll make it simple. And you're like, okay, I got people spread out all over here, and I need people to all be able to get food, but I need it so they're not going to just over-harvest everything and wipe it out. So I need it to be there sometimes, but not all the times. We'll make them migrate. Because it's in their instincts. It's in animal instincts. It's like we programmed them to migrate so that they would cover the expanses of the land. People would be able to harvest them at different... Because it actually makes very little sense. Like if you're a smart goose and you're like, hey, I don't need to be migrating north and south like this. I'll just stay south. I can procreate down here. I'll go east and west if I feel like it. But like they were programmed. It's in their instincts to migrate. And I think that is one of the proofs of the design. Because it's how that feeds all man and keeps them from being completely wiped out.
Wouldn't that be kind of a plot hole in that theory, though, that like I could just go east and west? Wouldn't that be the same thing as going north and south?
No, what I'm saying is they don't have a choice. They don't have the choice to go east and west. They don't. They go to the same spots every year no matter what. They're programmed to do that.
Yeah.
Even so, like you have the animals, like the fish. I've never said these words out loud, so I'm going to be spitballing as I'm thinking here. But you look at the sockeye salmon, right? They go out to the ocean. Well, man hasn't been able to always go on the ocean and hunt for sockeye salmon, right? So they go out there and grow and come back, and then they go back up the same rivers, and they will go to the same rivers every year no matter what. So man could start to calculate that, to know that they're going to go there to mate again, to lay their eggs and everything else. And it's like all these instincts where animals don't have a choice, but yet somehow makes it way better for us, seems to me like it was designed. That's how I would design it, right? That was like the practical use that I would do with it. And then I was looking at the flood. So the flood was interesting too. Did you know that on the top of Mount Everest, they found petrified clams that are like bigger than you, bigger than me and AJ. Big clams, giant. But what's incredible about it is they were found closed. You don't find dead clams closed, because when clams die, they release, they like brittle apart, they open. That's why when you find seashells on the shore, you always find one half, because they got let go of the other half somewhere. If you can find two matching, you're pretty cool. Probably won't ever do it. My dad can find four-leaf clovers, is what I said, so maybe he could pull it off. But what's interesting about that is, now, I actually had trouble deciphering this, but if you read like the Noah's Ark story, it sounds like, according to Noah's Ark, that the mountains rose out of the floods near the end of the flood. Meaning, like, and a lot of people believe that if the crust was opening up and the water was coming out, and the water was coming from the sky, and all those plates and tectonic shifts that were happening because of the floods, that's what actually created the mountains. I had trouble deciphering that specifically. What we do know is they rose out near the end of the flood, and the waters receded quickly. And so what happened was, if you've got what happens when we go up to the Thumb, and it's Mudville, right? Mm-hmm. When there's too much rain, it becomes Mudville. Things can get buried alive when the waters are receding fast. That's what happens when you see tides and that sort of thing. So the waters receded fast and left those petrified clams to get pushed down and buried alive, so they couldn't open. That's what caused them to be fossilized and not open. And this is at the top of Mount Everest. They found these.
Okay.
It's like there's sea life at the top of Mount Everest. There's sea life in the desert. Petrified, from depending on what year you want to put it, but basically everyone's timing it about the same time as Noah's Ark. So I thought that was pretty interesting too, that was like another key point, is like they're finding them there. They're finding those clams there right now, and other sea life too. So I found that to be pretty interesting. So I kind of talked about that, but also like how my belief, because I am a bit of a nerd, where I like things a little bit more proven, but I also believe that if you spend any time looking, it's like, well, I'm being asked to believe miracles for the sake of man, or I'm being asked to believe in miracles to think that there's more than just us. And that's where it's like, to me, God seems like the practical choice. And people would be like, why Jesus? Right? Then, okay, you believe in God, right? Because I didn't decipher anything different from the Muslims just there. I didn't decipher anything different from, Hindus or anything else, right? Why Jesus specifically? And when looking at the Bible and looking at historical information, there are so many accounts that Jesus was around, from people that didn't believe he was God, people that disliked him. There's proof of Pontius Pilate. There's archaeological proof that of the cities and stuff that he was in, of the people he interacted with. There's all kinds of stories of people from perspectives that didn't believe he was God outside of the Bible, but know that Jesus was there and he did these things and he was crucified. And there's also quite a bit of proof that the disciples existed as well, by name, by thousands of sources. So you've got all this proof that these people were here and how they died. So Jesus was crucified on Good Friday, which we know. So if Jesus was crucified on Good Friday, those 12 disciples that followed him at the time, they all, the night that he was crucified, kind of ditched. They bailed on him because they were scared for their life, because they were going to get killed too if they were associated with him. So they bailed and abandoned him. He was crucified, rose again on the third day, on the Sunday. And that's the story we know. The stone rolled away, and he appeared back to the disciples, and they're like freaked out. You know what I mean? They're all eating dinner, and this guy busts in, and he appears to him, and he's like, no, you can touch me. It's me. He's got, the scars and everything like that, but he's like, go ahead and touch me. They realize he's real. And then from that point on, they were completely changed, because they knew him before. They knew that he died. They had proof of his death. They saw his death, abandoned him, because they were so scared for their own life. But when they saw that everything he had said was true, they went out to the world, and there's tons of proof of this as well, outside of the Bible. They go out and they preach his word everywhere. But they were all murdered brutally. And how were they murdered? So one of them was beheaded. One of them it was either Peter or Paul, was speared to death, and then the other one was supposed to be crucified. But because he didn't feel that he was worthy of being killed the same way Jesus was, he has to be crucified upside down. So what was the change? So all they had to do to not be murdered, by the way, was say that what they were saying wasn't true, that they didn't see Jesus rise again, that what he was saying wasn't true, that they didn't believe it. So you have these individuals that when they doubted before they saw him rise again, they were like, not, I'm out. I gotta go. You know, I'm not gonna get killed over this. But once they saw it and had proof, and there's so much data on this outside of the Bible, they went out and told everyone. They were murdered. And people celebrated their murders that didn't believe that Jesus was God. But they were willing to die then because they believed so wholeheartedly after they saw it with their own eyes. So you have like 12 accounts there that are pretty strong that point to Jesus. And then you look at like his teachings, and he was literally the most ideal man. And he fulfilled all the prophecies from the Old Testament that he was supposed to. So that's why. But it's way more in depth than that. You have to watch the whole vlog. But I just kind of want to connect the dots here on like what the overarching story was in the whole thing.